Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Continuing to take a look at the next week's slate, heading out to the Pac-12 as Washington State heads on the road to play the Oregon Ducks. And I'll start with this. I would not want to be the team that has to play Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks after that loss against Washington. You might just get a scorched earth performance from Dan Lanning and the Ducks. And I'll say this. I was really high on the Oregon Ducks heading into the year. A lot of the Oregon fans who've been listening know that. Not much has changed after what you saw Saturday. We kind of broke it down after the game, but I mean, Oregon outgained Washington 541 yards to 415. They won the turnover battle. I mean, there was 3 plays in that game. 0-3 on fourth down is kind of the story of the outcome there. And that's what happens. If you told me that was a national championship game, that game was played early January for a national championship, would have believed you. Those are 2 of the best teams in the country that I think right now it's looking like you'll get a rematch of that at the end of the year. This Oregon Ducks team, I get the loss stings. This is such a good football team on both sides of the football. Really excited to get into this matchup. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys, and especially the Pac-12 fans. There's been just so much support, and this is a conference that I said I think it's the best conference in college football right now. A lot of people in the SEC can say the defensive lines are better out there. You look at the quarterback play, you look at the offenses that you see out in the Pac-12. So I think it's the best conference in the country right now, and the games have been absolutely awesome, like we saw Washington, Oregon last weekend. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel again. Appreciate all the support you guys have shown the boys, and would love to hear what you guys think in the comment section below. Picks, predictions, keys to the game. Without further ado, let's get into this, and I want to start with this Oregon offense going up against a Washington State defense that this Washington State team in general, hard to figure out. You see them play phenomenal and beat a team like Wisconsin, beat a team like Oregon State. And then the last 2 weeks, especially with their offense, it's been out of sync. It is probably the best way to put it. Now, Washington State on defense, it's a solid unit. I think they got really good edge rushers, Brennan Jackson, Ron Stone. They have a few guys in the back end that fly around and make plays, but it hasn't necessarily been consistent enough. And you saw that against Arizona, where Arizona was kind of piecing them up. And you look at this Oregon offense, and I'll say this right now, I like this Washington State team. I like Jay Dickert, but you look at this Oregon offense and how complete they are, it's really hard to see Washington State having a ton of success stopping this Oregon team. Now, getting into why I think this Oregon team is just so dominant and really just so dangerous, is because they're balanced. And there's not a lot of teams across the country that can say their offense can make it happen both ways. But that's exactly what the Oregon Ducks can do. You even look back at that Washington game. They threw the ball 44 times. Bo Nix put up 371 yards. They ran the ball 40 times for over 200 yards. Like, they can do it both ways. They have success doing it both ways. And you're seeing an offense that when you're that dynamic, you have that many different playmakers on the offensive side of the ball combined with one of the best quarterbacks in the country. It's really, really hard to stop that kind of offense, starting with the rushing attack. Bucky Irving, is he the best running back in the country right now? Because I get it. Like, the NFL might not love him because he's a little bit smaller. That dude runs the rock extremely hard, makes the first person miss routinely every single time, really good out of the backfield. The Oregon offensive line, I don't think was great in pass protection, but man, can they road grade up front. I think they can be good in pass protection. I just don't think they were elite against Washington last Saturday. But man, like, we talked about the amount of bodies that Oregon lost to the NFL last year. A lot of those guys were day 3 picks, are undrafted free agents. This Oregon offensive line right now, you especially look at the tackle position. I get Josh Conley Jr., young guy. He's made some mistakes, pre-snap penalties. But man, is he physically imposing. And you have so many guys that are just NFL caliber dudes up front. Malik Terry's done a phenomenal job with this Oregon offensive line. They can road grade. And if you want to commit bodies to stopping Bucky Irving and what they can do on the ground, you have one of the best wide receivers in Troy Franklin. A lot of conversation about Roma Duzna. He is awesome. Troy Franklin is another first-round caliber NFL wide receiver that just doesn't really get talked enough about. So you have that Bo Nix, Troy Franklin connection, that battery that is so important to having an explosive offense. When you have a quarterback wide receiver combination like that, you look at past national championship teams, especially the teams at Alabama who had that quarterback wide receiver duo, that makes you dangerous. But what's even more dangerous is they got other guys who can make plays, especially in space. I mean, Tez Johnson's a guy that if you give him the football in space, he's making people miss. hitting explosive plays. Trayshawn Holden can get it done. Terrence Ferguson, very good player. I know I'm kind of going just scorched earth here with this Oregon offense, but I love not only the identity, which is we can run the football, we can use Bo Nix's legs, and we can attack the deeper third and throw the football too, but also just the amount of talent on this Oregon team. You saw it against Washington. You've seen it all year. This is still one of the best offenses that you see in the country. And again, might have scored 40 points if they converted a couple of those fourth downs against Washington. You can discuss whether or not you should go with those. I personally am in the boat that I like Dan Lanning trusting his elite quarterback in offense to make the plays to win the game. Did it work on Saturday? No, but very well likely it might work in the Pac-12 championship game, and Dan Lanning gets commended for it. So I'll hold off judgment until later on with that. Now, looking at this Washington State offense going up against an Oregon defense, the Oregon defense I thought played pretty well. You go back and watch the film. When Oregon was giving up touchdowns, it was just, you got to tip your cap. And Michael Penix, the wide receivers that they have, Roma Duzny, that is a phenomenal offense. And sometimes they're just going to make plays that you just got to tip your cap and say that's too good. I really do like this Oregon offense. Now, they'll be tested against a Washington State or Oregon defense. They'll be tested by a Washington State offense that is just kind of hit or miss. You've seen them against Oregon State, especially in that first half. An Oregon State defense that I think is pretty good, put up a ton of points, a ton of passing yards. Cam Ward, again, you talk about why the Pac-12 is so good. Cam Ward is one of the better, more talented quarterbacks in the country. Now, the problem with this Washington State offense is it's not very consistent. And going back to why I like Oregon so much is if they are struggling to throw the football, they can run the football extremely well, move the chains, and score touchdowns that way. This Washington State team, if it is not going well through the air, it's extremely one-dimensional. I mean, you look at the yards per carry, 2.3 yards per carry. That's 131st in the country. They really struggle to run the football. This offensive passing attack can be so dynamic. You have great wide receivers, Lincoln Victor coming back, Josh Kelly, Kyle Williams, real game breakers, speedsters who can hit the big play. That being said, if it's out of sync, there's a lot of 3-and-outs. It puts a lot of stress on this Washington State defense. My take on this Oregon or Washington State offense is it can be extremely dangerous if it's hitting. But if it's not hitting, it sometimes you can just, quite frankly, turn into a liability. So what Washington State offense that you get against Oregon is going to be a massive storyline in this game. Now, getting to the pick and how I see this, I like Oregon a lot here. And I said scorched earth, or 20 points that's a lot of points. Like I totally understand that. And that's not a disrespect to this Washington State team. But you ask me who's the more complete team and who's been playing better football the last couple of weeks? Washington State, 2 really, really ugly losses to UCLA where they didn't gain over 250 total yards of offense. Ugly loss to Arizona at home versus an Oregon team that, again, I get coming off a loss against Washington. I thought they played great football. They could have easily won that football game, had a few plays go their way. Give me the Oregon Ducks to cover the 20 points. You might get a effort from Oregon that is different. Like they might go scorched earth here. And you ask me if I'm concerned about Dan Lanning getting the backs off the mat here. I don't have that issue. I don't have that question. I think Dan Lanning's got a really, really strong culture entrenched in that Oregon team. I think they're going to be ready to come out at home. It's going to be jumping. Give me Oregon to cover the 20 points. Again, this Oregon Ducks team, absolute weapon on both sides of the ball. One of the more complete teams in college football. And I, again, think there's a really strong argument that you saw 2 of the best teams play college football on Saturday with Washington and Oregon. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.